Captain Elias Ward sat alone in the corner of the long, metallic hall. The room was filled with soldiers from many worlds, but the air was heavy with silence. Everyone was waiting for the announcement. Everyone knew why they were there, and no one wanted to speak first. A mission was about to be given, and it was not an ordinary mission. Across the table, a holographic image flickered to life. It showed the face of a child, delicate with pale blue skin and glowing silver eyes. The voice of the counselor echoed across the hall. "This is Princess Lyra of the Zyril Empire. She is missing. Her escape ship crashed in enemy territory during the last border conflict. We have received signals that she is still alive." A low murmur moved through the room. The name of the Zyril was enough to make even hardened soldiers uneasy. The Zyril Empire was feared across the galaxy. Their queen, Sarilith, was known as the Empress of Cold Stars. She ruled with strength, wisdom, and sometimes with cruelty. Her armies were unmatched, her fleets endless, and her daughter was everything to her. The counselor continued, his face stern. "The queen has not declared war yet, but if her daughter dies, she will. Entire worlds could burn. If the princess is not found and returned, peace will end." The hall went silent. No one volunteered. No one moved. Everyone understood the danger. To step into Zyril territory without permission was madness. The jungles were deadly, the skies full of mercenaries, and the rebels hiding in the shadows were eager to use the princess as a bargaining chip. Anyone who went would probably never return. Elias leaned back, arms crossed, studying the faces of the others. Soldiers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Some looked away. Some pretended to adjust their armor. Not a single hand was raised. The counselor's voice grew harder. "This mission requires courage. It requires sacrifice. But most of all, it requires someone who understands what is at stake." Still, no one spoke. Elias exhaled slowly. He had seen this before. Missions too dangerous, too uncertain. People always waited for someone else to step forward. His mind went back to his own childhood, to the day his little sister had been caught in the ruins of a collapsed building on Earth. No one had wanted to go in after her because it was too risky. But Elias had gone. That memory still burned in him. He pushed himself up from his seat. The sound of his boots echoed across the floor. "I'll go," he said, his voice steady. All eyes turned toward him. The counselor frowned. "Captain Ward, do you understand what this means? The Zyril are not our allies. If you are caught, they will not treat you kindly." "I understand," Elias replied. "But she's just a child. Whatever her people are, whatever wars they fight, she doesn't deserve to die out there alone." The room was silent again, but this time it was filled with a different weight. Some soldiers shook their heads, whispering that he was crazy. Others looked down in shame. The counselor studied him for a long moment, then finally nodded. "Very well, Captain Ward. The mission is yours. You will leave at dawn. May the stars protect you." The next morning, Elias stood in the hangar. His shuttle was small, patched together from old parts, nothing compared to the massive cruisers that lined the docking bays. But he didn't care. He had always believed that a soldier was measured not by the ship he flew, but by the choices he made. A mechanic handed him a data pad. "Coordinates of the last distress signal, sir. It's in the shadowed expanse. That's rebel territory. You'll need to move fast." Elias took it with a nod. "Thanks." Before boarding, he paused, looking out the hangar's open shield. The stars stretched endless across the void, bright and cold. Somewhere out there was a lost girl, scared and alone. Somewhere out there, enemies were hunting her too. He clenched his fists. He had given his word, and that was enough. The shuttle's engines roared to life, lifting off the platform. Inside the cockpit, Elias adjusted the controls with practiced ease. The ship shook as it broke through the station's shield and entered the silence of space. Alone now, Elias let out a breath. He checked the hologram again. The princess's face glowed faintly above the console. She couldn't have been more than 8 years old. Her eyes were wide, almost too wise for her age. He wondered what she was thinking right now. Was she crying? Was she hiding? Did she still believe her mother would come for her? His jaw tightened. "Don't worry, kid. I'll get you out." The journey took hours. Stars drifted past as he moved closer to the shadowed expanse. Space here was different. Darker, heavier, as though the very light was afraid to enter. Old wreckage floated everywhere, remains of forgotten battles. His sensors beeped as he passed. Derelict ships, some human, some alien, all silent graves now. Finally, he reached the edge of a storm belt. Green lightning flashed across swirling black clouds. The distress signal was somewhere inside. Elias took control, guiding the shuttle through violent winds and bursts of plasma. The ship rocked, alarms flashing, but he held steady. After what felt like hours, the storm broke, revealing a world below. It was covered in dense forests that glowed faintly with bioluminescent light. Rivers of silver liquid wound through the trees, and great mountains rose like black teeth into the sky. Elias lowered the shuttle, scanning for the signal. A red marker blinked on his display. Wreckage, deep in the forest. "Got you," he whispered. He landed in a small clearing. The shuttle's ramp lowered, and Elias stepped out. The air was thick, damp, and filled with strange sounds, chirps, growls, whispers carried on the wind. He checked his rifle, slung it over his shoulder, and began to move. Every step was a reminder that he was not welcome here. The trees loomed tall, their leaves glowing faintly. Shadows moved at the edge of his vision, but when he turned, nothing was there. He stayed alert, boots sinking slightly in the wet earth. After an hour of walking, he found the wreck. It was half buried in roots and vines, smoke still rising faintly from its hull. He approached carefully, scanning with his visor. Life signs. Weak, but present. His heart raced. He pushed through the wreckage, moving aside panels and wires. Then he saw her. The princess. She was curled in the corner, her silver eyes wide with fear. Her small hands clutched a broken piece of metal like a weapon. When she saw him, she hissed, a sound like a frightened animal. Elias slowly lowered his rifle and raised his empty hand. "It's okay. I'm not here to hurt you." Her eyes narrowed. She didn't speak, but her body trembled. Elias took a step, closer, moving slowly. "My name is Elias. I came to take you home." The girl shook her head violently, pressing herself against the wall. Her voice was a whisper, sharp and scared. "Human." Elias froze. Of course, the Zyril taught their children to fear humans, to see them as monsters of war. To her, he was not a rescuer. He was the enemy. But Elias didn't move back. Instead, he lowered himself to one knee, keeping his eyes level with hers. "I know what they told you, but I'm not here to fight. I'm here because you're lost, and no child should be left alone." She stared at him, breathing fast. Her grip on, the broken metal tightened. For a moment, Elias thought she might strike, but then her arm lowered just slightly. It was a start. Outside, the forest stirred. Something moved in the distance. Something big. Elias heard the crunch of leaves, the low growl of a predator. His hand tightened on his rifle. He looked back, at the girl. "Stay behind me," he whispered. The forest was not safe. Enemies were near, and the mission had only just begun. The growl outside grew louder. The forest shifted as heavy footsteps pressed into the damp ground. Elias raised his rifle and turned slowly toward the sound. The young princess pressed herself deeper into the wreckage, her silver eyes wide with fear. She whispered something in her language, but Elias didn't understand. Still, he caught the fear in her voice. "Stay low," he told her, his voice calm but firm. The bushes shook, and then it appeared. A massive creature with dark scales and glowing green eyes stepped into view. Its body was long like a serpent but carried on 4 powerful legs. Its jaws opened wide, showing rows of sharp teeth. Saliva dripped from its mouth, sizzling when it touched the ground. The beast's head turned, eyes locking on Elias and the girl. Of course, Elias muttered. It had to be one of these. The creature hissed, then lunged forward with terrifying speed. Elias fired. The rifle's energy bolts lit up the dark forest, striking the beast's side. It roared, staggered, then came again. Go, Elias shouted, motioning to the princess. Run. But she didn't move. She was frozen, paralyzed by fear. The beast swiped its massive claw. Elias rolled aside, firing again. The shot struck its eye, and it screamed in fury. Elias moved quickly, putting himself between the princess and the monster. His mind raced. If he didn't kill it fast, both of them would be dead. The beast reared back, opening its jaws to strike. Elias aimed carefully, heart pounding, and fired straight down its throat. The energy bolt exploded inside, and the creature collapsed, shaking the ground with its fall. Smoke rose from its mouth. Its glowing eyes dimmed. For a long moment, the forest was quiet again, except for Elias's heavy breathing. He lowered his rifle and turned back. The princess was staring at him, her eyes wider than ever. She had seen him fight, seen him stand between her and death. Elias walked closer, crouching down. Are you hurt? She didn't answer. Her small hands trembled, still holding the broken piece of metal. Elias gently reached into one of his pouches and pulled out a ration bar. He unwrapped it and placed it on the ground between them. Food, he said softly. The girl looked at it, then at him. Slowly, with hesitation, she reached forward and picked it up. She sniffed it carefully, then took a cautious bite. Her eyes widened. It wasn't like anything she had tasted before, but it was warm, filling. Elias allowed himself a small smile. See? Not poison. She didn't smile back, but she didn't throw it away either. She finished the bar quickly, hunger overcoming fear. Elias sat down on a piece of wreckage, giving her space. My name is Elias, he said, pointing to himself. Alias. The princess hesitated, then whispered in a soft voice. Lyra. Elias nodded. Lyra. That's your name. She blinked, surprised he had understood. Then for the first time since he found her, she lowered the piece of broken metal and set it aside. They stayed in the wreck for the night. Elias built a small fire using a heat unit from his kit. The forest around them was alive with strange sounds, calls of distant animals, rustling leaves, the hum of glowing insects. Lyra sat close to the fire, hugging her knees. Elias checked his data pad. The signal from his ship was weak, blocked by the dense jungle. The only way out was to walk. That meant days of traveling through dangerous land. He looked at Lyra. She was watching the flames, her silver eyes reflecting the light. She looked so small, so fragile, and yet she was the daughter of one of the most powerful rulers in the galaxy. Tomorrow, Elias said, more to himself than to her. We move toward the capital. I'll get you home. Lyra tilted her head, not understanding all the words, but she caught the meaning. Her lips parted slightly as though she wanted to speak, but no sound came. She simply nodded once. Morning came with mist covering the forest. Elias woke first, scanning the area. Nothing unusual. He packed his gear and motioned to Lyra. Time to go. She followed, staying a few steps behind him. Her movements were quiet, light, almost like a shadow. She had learned to hide well in this dangerous place. They walked for hours. The ground was uneven, roots twisting like snakes, and the air was heavy with moisture. Strange glowing birds flew overhead, their wings leaving trails of light. Lyra stopped often to look at them, but Elias kept her moving. As the day passed, Elias noticed she was slowing down. Her steps grew weaker and her small body trembled with exhaustion. He stopped, kneeling beside her. You're tired. She didn't reply, but her eyes lowered, ashamed. Elias sighed, then crouched down with his back to her. Climb on. She hesitated, not understanding. He patted his shoulder. Here, I'll carry you. Lyra's eyes widened. No one had ever carried her like that before, not even her own guards. For a long moment, she didn't move. Then, slowly, She climbed onto his back, her small arms wrapping around his neck. Elias stood, adjusting her weight. She was light, like carrying a feather. Hold on tight. For the rest of the day he carried her. She rested her head against his shoulder, listening to the steady rhythm of his steps. The fear in her chest began to fade, replaced by something new, something she didn't understand yet. Trust. That night, they camped near a river that glowed faintly under the starlight. Elias caught a strange fish with his survival knife, cooking it over the fire. Lyra watched carefully, then tasted. Ew, her eyes lit up at the flavor. She looked at him and whispered, "Good." Elias chuckled. "Glad you think so." As the fire crackled, Lyra finally spoke more. Her voice was small, broken with hesitation, but Elias understood parts of it. She asked why he had come. Elias looked at her for a long moment. Then he answered softly, "Because you're a child. You shouldn't be alone. Someone had to come." Lyra tilted her head, puzzled. No one had ever spoken to her that way before. To her people, she was a princess, first a child second, but this human saw her only as a girl who needed help. Her silver eyes softened. She whispered almost to herself, "Guardian." Elias blinked. "What?" She repeated the word, firmer this time. "Guardian." She was giving him a name. Elias smiled faintly. "If that's what you want to call me, I'll take it." For the first time, Lyra gave him the smallest hint of a smile. The next days were full of danger. They crossed rivers with currents strong enough to drag them under. They climbed cliffs where one wrong step meant falling into endless darkness. Strange predators stalked them, their glowing eyes watching from the shadows. But each time danger came, Elias stood in front, his rifle ready, his courage unshaken. And each time, Lyra stayed close behind him, her trust growing stronger. Once, when a pack of creatures circled them, Elias used fire to drive them away. Lyra had clutched his sleeve, trembling. After the beasts were gone, she whispered, "Safe, with you." Those words struck Elias deeper than he expected. He had been called many things in his life: soldier, captain, fighter. But never had someone said they felt safe with him. Not like this. One night, as they rested beneath the glowing trees, Elias looked at the stars above. Lyra was curled beside him, already asleep. He thought of the queen, Sarilith, waiting somewhere, far away. Did she even know her daughter was alive? Did she know that a human, of all people, was carrying her home? Elias shook his head. Politics didn't matter. Empires didn't matter. All that mattered was the little girl sleeping beside the fire. He whispered quietly, almost like a promise. "I'll get you back to her, no matter what it takes." And though she was asleep, Lyra's small hand reached out, resting against his arm, as if she had heard. The bond between them had begun. Fragile, uncertain, but real. In the darkness of a dangerous world, a human soldier and an alien princess had taken their first steps toward trust, and though they did not know it yet, their journey together would change the galaxy forever. The forest was quiet the next morning, too quiet. Elias woke instantly, his soldier's instincts on edge. The usual sounds of chirping insects and distant creatures were gone. The air itself felt heavy. Lyra stirred beside him, rubbing her eyes. She looked at him questioningly, sensing his unease. "Stay close," Elias whispered, scanning the trees with his rifle in hand. They moved cautiously, following the faint signal on his datapad that guided them toward the Zyral capital. Every step forward was dangerous. The jungle seemed alive, watching them, waiting. And then Elias saw it, a mark on the trees. It wasn't natural. A symbol burned into the bark. He frowned. Rebels. His suspicion was confirmed moments later when a voice called out from the shadows. "Drop the weapon, human." Figures stepped out from the foliage, at least a dozen of them armed and armored in jagged metal. Their faces were masked, their eyes glowing faintly red from cybernetic implants. Zero rebels, outcasts who hated their queen, hated her empire, and now saw a chance to use the princess for their own gain. Elias positioned himself between Lyra and the rebels, rifle steady. "Not going to happen," he said calmly. The leader, taller than the rest, laughed harshly. "You carry something precious. Give her to us and maybe we'll let you live." Lyra's small hand gripped Elias's sleeve tightly. She trembled, whispering his new name, Guardian. Elias glanced at her, then back at the rebels. His voice was firm. "She's not yours. She's not mine. She belongs with her family. And I'm taking her home." The leader snarled, "Then you'll die here." The rebels moved forward. Elias fired first. His rifle crackled, sending bolts of energy that struck two rebels before they could react. The jungle exploded with noise, blaster fire, shouts. The crash of branches as the rebels attacked. Elias moved like a shadow, pulling Lyra behind cover, returning fire with precise bursts. He was outnumbered, but he fought with the determination of someone who had no choice. Every time a rebel tried to flank, he cut them down. Every time one aimed for Lyra, he put himself in the way. Lyra crouched low, hands over her ears, eyes wide with fear. But she never let go of Elias's sleeve. After several long minutes, the rebels began to fall back. Their leader cursed, pointing a blade at Elias. "This isn't over, human. You can't fight us all." Then they vanished into the shadows, leaving silence behind. Elias lowered his rifle slowly, breathing hard. He checked Lyra. "You okay?" She nodded shakily. Her eyes were filled with both fear and wonder. She had seen him fight again, and each time her trust in him grew stronger. The days that followed were filled with tension. The rebels did not give up. They followed from the shadows, setting traps, blocking paths, sending small squads to harass them. Elias had to stay sharp every step a fight to survive. One evening, as they crossed a narrow canyon, gunfire erupted from above. Elias grabbed Lyra, pulling her behind a rock. Stones shattered around them as shots rained down. "We're pinned," Elias muttered. He scanned the cliffside. Too many shooters. They couldn't stay. He looked at Lyra, her small face pale with fear. "You trust me?" She nodded quickly, though her hands trembled. "Good." Elias lifted her into his arms. Then, without warning, he sprinted across the canyon floor, weaving and dodging as blasts exploded around him. The ground shook. Rocks fell, but he kept moving. One blast struck close, throwing him off balance. He stumbled, falling hard, shielding Lyra with his body. Pain shot through his shoulder, but he gritted his teeth, pushing back up. He fired as he ran, hitting two rebels above. The rest hesitated, and in that moment, Elias leapt across a gap, sliding behind cover on the far side. Safe. For now. Lyra clung to him, her eyes wet with tears. "Guardian?" she whispered, voice breaking. Elias looked at her, his own breathing rough. He wiped a tear from her cheek with his gloved hand. "I told you. I'll get you home." That night they camped under a cliff far from the canyon. Elias's shoulder throbbed where the blast had grazed him, but he said nothing. Lyra noticed anyway. She moved closer, gently touching the wound. He smiled faintly. "Don't worry. I've had worse." But she didn't look convinced. Instead, she whispered a few words in her language. Words he didn't understand. But the tone was soft, almost like a prayer. Elias lay back, staring at the stars. He had seen war, seen destruction, but this was different. This was a fight not for territory or power, but for one small girl's life. And somehow it felt more important than anything he had ever done. The next day they reached the edge of the forest. Beyond it lay open plains, stretching far toward the horizon. In the distance, faint towers glowed, the outer structures of the Zyril capital. Lyra's eyes lit up. "Home," she whispered. Elias nodded. "Almost." But the open plains were dangerous. No cover, no place to hide. If the rebels attacked here, it would be hard to defend. Sure enough, halfway across, shadows appeared on the horizon. Vehicles. Speeding toward them, dust rose into the air. "Here we go again," Elias muttered. He lifted Lyra onto his back. "Hold on tight." The vehicles roared closer, weapons mounted on their sides. Elias ran, using every ounce of strength, but the machines were faster. Blaster fire tore through the ground near him. Thinking quickly, he spotted a rocky outcrop. Ahead. He sprinted for it, diving behind the stones just as the vehicles circled, pinned again. Outnumbered again. Elias set Lyra down gently. "Stay here." She shook her head violently, grabbing his arm. "No, stay." He placed a hand on her shoulder. "I'll be fine. Trust me." Then he stood, rifle blazing. He aimed for the vehicle's engines, striking one, then another. Explosions rocked the planes as two machines burst into flames. The others swerved, firing wildly. Elias ducked back, heart pounding. His rifle was nearly empty. He looked at Lyra. She was clutching the broken metal she had carried from the wreck, holding it like a charm. Her eyes met his, filled with fear but also determination. "Guardian," she whispered again. That single word gave him strength. He rose once more, firing his last shots. One vehicle spun out of control, crashing into another. The remaining rebels retreated, their engines roaring as they vanished into the distance. Silence returned. The smell of smoke hung in the air. Elias sank against the rocks, exhausted. Lyra crawled to him, wrapping her small arms around him tightly. "Safe," she whispered. "Safe. With you?" Elias held her back, his heart heavy and light at the same time. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was beginning to believe in him completely. By the time they reached the outer defenses of the capital, Elias was limping from exhaustion, and Lyra was fast asleep on his back. The great walls of black crystal rose before them, glowing with energy. Guard towers loomed, weapons ready. Elias stopped at the base of the walls, staring up. This was it. The hardest part was still ahead. But Lyra stirred, opening her eyes. She saw the towers, the walls, the faint glow of her home. Tears filled her silver eyes. She pressed her forehead gently against Elias's shoulder. "Home," she whispered again, voice trembling with hope. And Elias, battle-worn and weary, smiled faintly. "Yeah, kid. Almost home." What neither of them knew was that inside the walls, enemies and allies alike were already preparing. The Queen waited, desperate and fierce. The Council whispered in fear. The rebels plotted their last ambush. The road behind them was fire and steel. The road ahead would decide everything. The walls of the Zyral capital rose high above Elias, black crystal reaching for the stars. They glowed faintly, as though alive with energy. Towers stood like guardians, their sharp points glittering in the night. Elias stood at the base of the gates, Lyra resting on his back, her small arms around his neck. She stirred, waking slowly, her silver eyes widening as she saw the familiar walls. For a moment, her face softened with relief. "Home," she whispered, voice trembling. Elias exhaled. "Yeah, we made it, but it was not over." The gates were guarded by Zyral soldiers, their tall forms clad in dark armor that shimmered under the glow of the walls. Their eyes, glowing faint blue, narrowed as they spotted Elias. One soldier raised a weapon. "Human. Step away from the child." Elias shifted Lyra onto her feet, standing in front of her. "Not until I know she's safe. I came to bring her back to her mother." The soldiers looked at one another, surprised at his words. For a human to walk into the capital, carrying their princess, alive, was something none of them had expected. Lyra stepped forward, her small voice ringing out. "He saved me." The soldiers froze, their weapons lowered slightly. No one dared disbelieve the princess. The gates opened slowly, crystal parts sliding apart with a deep hum. Beyond them lay the city, towers of shining stone, streets glowing with rivers of light, and creatures from many worlds moving through its pathways. The soldiers surrounded Elias and Lyra, forming a protective circle as they led them inside. City was breathtaking. Elias had seen many alien worlds, but nothing like this. Towers curved upward like frozen flames, glowing veins of light running through them. Bridges stretched between spires, carrying streams of floating orbs that served as transport. The air hummed with energy, and the ground beneath his boots felt alive. People stopped as they passed. Zeril citizens stared with wide eyes, whispering in their melodic tongue. Some gasped when they saw Lyra walking beside a human, holding his hand tightly. Elias ignored the stares. He kept his focus on Lyra, making sure she stayed close. Finally, they reached the heart of the city, the throne hall. The building was a massive spire of black crystal, its peak lost in the clouds. The doors were carved with ancient runes, glowing faintly as they opened. Inside, the hall was vast, lit by rivers of light running through the walls. The floor was polished crystal, reflecting their steps. At the far end, upon a raised platform, sat the throne, and on the throne sat Queen Sarilith. She was taller than Elias had imagined, her form regal and fearsome. Her skin shimmered like polished obsidian, her eyes two burning stars of silver fire. A crown of living crystal rose from her head, and her robes flowed like liquid night. Her gaze fell upon Lyra first. For the briefest moment, her cold mask cracked, and her hands gripped the throne's arms tightly. Then her eyes turned to Elias. The hall filled with silence. Soldiers lined the walls, watching closely. Courtiers stood frozen, holding their breath. The Queen's voice rang out, deep and commanding. "Human, explain yourself. Why do you stand in my hall with my daughter?" Elias bowed his head slightly, keeping his voice steady. "I found her. She was lost, alone, hunted. I brought her back." The Queen's eyes narrowed. "And why? What does a human gain by risking his life for the blood of his enemy?" Elias glanced at Lyra, then back at the Queen. "She's a child. It doesn't matter where she comes from or who she is. She needed help. That was enough." A murmur spread through the hall. The words were simple, but no one had ever spoken to the Queen that way before. Lyra broke free from Elias's side and ran forward. She climbed the steps of the throne, tears streaming down her face. "Mom, I'm back. He saved me." Gasps echoed around the hall as the little princess threw herself into her mother's arms. For the first time in many years, Queen Sarilith's icy mask melted. She embraced her daughter tightly, holding her as though she would never let go again. Her eyes shone with tears and her voice trembled. "Lyra, my little star, you are safe." The courtiers looked on in shock. Their queen, the unshakable ruler, the cold empress of stars, was weeping openly. After a long moment, Sarilith lifted her gaze back to Elias. She stood, her daughter still in her arms. Her voice was softer now, but still powerful. "You risked everything for her. You crossed rebel territory, fought my enemies, and survived. Tell me, why? Why would you do this, when so many others would not?" Elias straightened, meeting her gaze without fear. "Because someone had to. Because no child should die lost and alone, not yours, not anyone's." The Queen studied him. Her sharp eyes seemed to pierce into his very soul. Yet what she saw there made her pause. This human was not lying. He truly believed what he said. Lyra tugged at her mother's robe, looking up at her with pleading eyes. "Guardian," she whispered, pointing back at Elias. "He is my guardian." The Queen's breath caught. She looked back at Elias, her heart torn between pride, shame, and gratitude. One of the courtiers stepped forward, his voice cold. "Your Majesty, he is a human. He does not belong here. He should be removed at once." Others nodded, muttering agreement. Humans were often seen as rough, dangerous, untrustworthy. To have one in the throne hall was unthinkable. But Lyra clung tighter to her mother, shaking her head. "No, he saved me. He is good." The Queen raised a hand, silencing the court. She looked down at Elias. "What is it you want? Gold? Power? A place among my people?" Elias shook his head. "Nothing, I just wanted to bring her home." The hall fell into stunned silence. The queen's expression softened again, though her eyes still burned with intensity. She had ruled for centuries, seen countless warriors and leaders. All of them wanted something: power, riches, glory. But this man wanted nothing. Her daughter was alive because of him, and for that she could not see him as an enemy. The queen descended from her throne, standing before Elias. The hall trembled with the weight of the moment. She looked him in the eyes, and for the first time her voice carried warmth. "You have done something I will never forget. My daughter lives because of you. The Zyral Empire owes you a debt." Elias shook his head. "You don't owe me anything. Just keep her safe." Lyra slipped from her mother's arms and ran back to Elias. She wrapped her small arms around his waist, tears glistening in her eyes. "Don't go," she whispered. Elias knelt down, resting a hand gently on her shoulder. "You're safe now, Lyra, with your mother. You don't need me anymore." Her voice cracked. "I want you to stay. You are my guardian." Elias's chest tightened. Of all the battles he had fought, this was the hardest, saying goodbye. He looked at her with soft eyes. "You'll always have me here." He placed his hand over his heart. "But you belong with her." Lyra's tears fell, but she nodded slowly, understanding more than her young age should allow. The queen watched silently, her emotions hidden, but deep. She saw her daughter's bond with the human, a bond born of survival, courage, and kindness. It was something no soldier of hers had ever given, something even she, as a mother, had nearly lost. As Elias stood, the queen spoke again, her voice carrying through the hall. "Remember this day, my people. A human soldier saved the blood of your queen. He came not for power, not for riches, but for compassion. Let none here forget." The courtiers bowed their heads, their earlier doubts silenced. Elias turned toward the great doors, ready to leave. His mission was complete. He had done what he promised. But as he walked, he could feel Lyra's eyes on him, her small voice, echoing in his memory. "Guardian." And behind him, for the first time in centuries, the mighty Queen Seralith stood not as a ruler, but as a mother who had wept for her child. The throne hall remained heavy with silence even after Elias was gone. The courtiers whispered. The guards exchanged glances, and the queen held her daughter close. The galaxy would never see her the same way again. Nor would she see humanity the same way again. The Empress of Cold Stars had witnessed something greater than fear, greater than war. She had witnessed the simple, unstoppable strength of human compassion. The great crystal doors of the throne hall closed slowly behind Elias. The echoes of his footsteps faded in the long corridor as he walked away from the queen and her daughter. The hall behind him still held the weight of his words, but Elias did not look back. His mission was done. For days he had fought across jungles, canyons, and plains, carrying Lyra through fire and danger. He had promised her one thing: "I'll get you home." Now she was home. His heart felt heavy and light at the same time. Soldiers escorted him through the capital, though not as prisoners. They walked beside him respectfully, their expressions unreadable. Citizens watched from the glowing streets, whispering among themselves. Some bowed their heads slightly as he passed. Others simply stared, unable to understand how a lone human soldier had walked into their empire carrying their princess alive. Elias ignored the stares. His mind was quiet, focused only on leaving without drawing more attention. At last he reached the outer gates. His ship, small, battered, and patched from too many battles, waited on the landing pad. The sight of it was like seeing an old friend. He paused, glancing up at the walls of the capital one last time. Somewhere beyond them, Lyra was safe in her mother's arms. The thought gave him peace. Inside the palace, Queen Seralith stood at a balcony, her daughter beside her. Lyra's small hand clutched her mother's robe tightly, but her silver eyes searched the city below. She spotted him. Far away, but clear enough. Elias's broad figure walking steadily toward his ship. "Mom," she whispered, her voice breaking. "He's leaving." The queen looked down as well. Her heart, usually hard as stone, tightened. She saw her daughter's longing, her pain at the thought of losing the man who had carried her across half a world. "Do you wish him to stay?" the queen asked softly. Lyra nodded quickly. "He is my guardian." The queen knelt, meeting her daughter's tearful eyes. "He has given you back to me. That was his promise. But you must understand, little star, guardians do not always stay. Sometimes their gift is to guide us home, and then they walk another path." Lyra wiped her, tears struggling to be brave, but her small voice whispered again, "I don't want him to go." The queen held her close. "Nor do I. But we must honor his choice." Back at the ship, Elias placed his hand on the side of the hull. The metal was scorched, but it still stood strong. He opened the ramp and stepped inside, the familiar smell of oil and steel greeting him. He ran a hand over the console, preparing for departure. But before he could power the engines, a sound echoed outside. Footsteps. Small, hurried footsteps. He turned. Lyra was there, running across the landing pad. Soldiers called after her, but she ignored them. Her small figure rushed straight toward him, her eyes filled with tears. "Guardian," she cried. Elias stepped down the ramp just as she reached him. She threw her arms around him, clinging tightly. "Don't go." His heart ached as he held her gently. "Lyra." She looked up at him, her silver eyes shimmering. "Please stay. You are my guardian. You promised to protect me." Elias crouched so he could meet her at eye level. His voice was steady, though heavy with emotion. "I promised to get you home, and I did. You're safe now, with your mother. She will protect you." Lyra shook her head stubbornly. "But you protected me. I feel safe with you." Elias sighed, resting a hand on her shoulder. "You made me promise once to bring you back. Now I need you to make me a promise. Promise me you'll be strong. Promise me you'll listen to your mother and that you'll never forget that you are braver than you think." Lyra sniffled, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. "I promise. But only if you promise something too." He smiled faintly. "What's that?" "That you will come back someday." Elias paused. He had no idea what the future would hold. Wars, missions, battles. His life was never certain. But he could not deny her this hope. "I promise," he said softly. Lyra hugged him one last time, burying her face against him. Then slowly she let go. Soldiers approached carefully, escorting her back to her mother. She looked over her shoulder again and again, her eyes never leaving him. Elias watched until she was gone. Only then did he turn back to his ship. When the engines roared to life, the entire city seemed to watch. From the balconies, streets, and towers, Cyril citizens looked up as the human ship lifted into the air. It rose higher and higher, glowing against the night sky. For many, it was the first time they felt respect for a human. Not fear, not suspicion. Respect. In the throne hall, Queen Seralith stood with Lyra in her arms, watching the ship disappear into the stars. Her voice was quiet, almost a whisper. "Perhaps the humans are not what I thought." Lyra rested, her head on her mother's shoulder. "He is different. He is kind." The queen closed her eyes, remembering the man's words. "She's not yours. She's not mine. She belongs with her family." She had ruled for centuries with cold strength. But now she had seen a new strength, one she could not ignore. The strength of compassion. Far from the capital, Elias sat alone in the cockpit. The stars stretched endlessly before him. He leaned back in his seat, exhaustion settling over him. He thought of Lyra's smile, her small hand clutching his sleeve, her voice calling him guardian. He thought of the queen's tears as she embraced her daughter. For the first time in a long while, Elias felt something he had almost forgotten. Peace. He knew the galaxy was still dangerous. Wars would come again, battles would be fought. But he also knew something else. His actions had planted a seed. Somewhere, in the heart of a powerful empire, an alien queen had wept because of the kindness of a human. and her people had seen. That would change things, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but someday. Weeks later, rumors spread across the stars. In marketplaces, on trading ships, in hidden rebel camps, the story was told again and again. They say a human soldier walked into the Zyril capital. They say he brought back their princess alive. They say the queen herself bowed her head to him. Each retelling grew, carrying awe and wonder. For the first time in generations, the galaxy whispered not of humanity's violence, but of their heart. On a distant colony, a group of human soldiers heard the tale. Some laughed, not believing it. Others grew quiet, their pride stirred. Maybe we're more than just fighters, one said softly. In the Zyril capital, Lyra sat by her window at night gazing at the stars. Her mother often joined her, silent and thoughtful. "Do you think he is out there?" Lyra asked one evening. The queen looked at her daughter's hopeful eyes and nodded. "Yes, and I think he always will be." Lyra smiled, whispering to the stars, "Come back soon, Guardian." Elias never heard those whispers. But in his heart, he carried her voice, her trust, and her promise. And as his ship traveled deeper into the stars, he knew one thing for certain. He had not only saved a child, he had changed a future.